In the collections of Uppsala University in Sweden lies one of the most important artifacts for Germanic philology, a book with a long and dramatic history, the Silver Bible, Codex Argentus, the longest written text in the Gothic language and the oldest book in any Germanic language. The name Goth is connected to two other Germanic tribes, namely the Goths and the Geats. These three Germanic tribal names are etymologically interconnected through the ablaut grades seen in the strong class 2 verb geut, gaut, gut, meaning to pour, as in Swedish gjuta, German gießen. The early medieval Goths and Geats were North Germanic speakers whose connection and relationship to the earlier East Germanic Goths is not fully understood and somewhat controversial. Goths and Goths are etymologically identical through the zero grade vowel o. This root is usually found in the end-stem masculine form Guti in Old Gutnish, meaning inhabitant of Gotland, and Old Icelandic Goti, Old English Gota, meaning both Gut and Goth. The name of the island is Gotland in Gutnish and Gotland in the other Germanic languages. In other words, for most Germanic languages, there was no clear distinction between Gut and Goth, since historically the root was the same. In Gothic, the word is attested in the form Gutthjode, meaning the Gothic people, as a compound. The root was borrowed into Greek and Latin as Goti. The name Geats is derived from the past tense form with the diphthong au in the root, regularly corresponding to Old Icelandic Gautr, Old Swedish Götaland, Old English geat, and this specifically refers to Götaland in Sweden, and not to the Goths on Gotland. However, when you want to compare these early Germanic groups and their languages, there's a huge time depth problem. Our main source for the Gothic language is Wulfila's Bible translation from the 300s AD. Lengthier texts from Gotland and Götaland are not written until the High Middle Ages, about a millennia later, in much younger languages. The time depth between Gothic and Old Swedish is like that between modern and Old Swedish. The Germanic languages changed immensely in the period 500 to 1000 AD. Therefore, comparing them is bound to be flawed and anachronistic. Rare runic finds and reconstructions are required to do this. Even though the names Goth and Gut are of the same root, the Germanic languages that are associated with those names must have split at a fairly early point. The language of the Gothic Bible was already different from the ancestor to Old Swedish and Gutnish, proto-Norse, that we actually have attested in short runic inscriptions. Gothic shows the following sound changes that did not happen in proto-Norse: merger of short Germanic e and I, that were still clearly separate vowels in North Germanic, Gothic quithan, stillan, compared to Old Gutnish quedha, stiela, showing the breaking of short e, showing that Gutnish, just like any other Old Norse dialect, did not have this merger. Gothic also shows final devoicing, that led to the merger of word final s and z, whereas North Germanic kept them distinct, eventually turning z into r. Gothic thris, Old Swedish, Old Gutnish thrir. Gothic also shows a distinct and unique leveling of Vernon's law to voiceless fricatives in, for example, strong verbs and even nouns. Gothic hausjan, sähon, Old Gutnish hoira, sago. Gothic also shows early loss of unstressed short a and I that are still seen in runic inscriptions, and also show clear effects of umlaut in the other Germanic languages. For example, Gothic gasts, but Old Swedish gester from Proto-Norse gastir. There are also considerable similarities between West and North Germanic, likely innovations that spread through a still interwoven dialect continuum in the migration period. Many of these are old and predate many of the later sound changes, when North and West Germanic split, and also many early language-specific sound changes. Stressed long e turning to a, where Gothic has redan, mel, North Germanic has rada, mal. Unstressed o became u in Northwest Germanic, but a in Gothic. Ertha, runa, Proto-Norse lathu. This final u was later dropped but left effects in the form of u-umlaut, seen in for example Old Icelandic. Gothic preserved proto-Germanic reduplication in class 7 verbs, but this was remodeled as a regular strong verb vowel change in Northwest Germanic. Gothic hetan, hechet, Old Gutnish haita, heat, Old Swedish heta, het. North and West Germanic also developed a new demonstrative, ancestral to English this, and this was unknown in Gothic. North and West Germanic also eventually underwent umlaut and rotacism that we can't see in Gothic, although the exact processes are language specific, with for example Old English having umlaut much earlier than Old High German. North Germanic also shares some traits with Anglo-Frisian, like leveled end-stem oblique endings, along with dative plural being for all nouns and adjectives. However, there are some shared traits between Gothic and North Germanic that are not found in West Germanic. For example, second person past tense singular of strong verbs had an added t, where West Germanic has a vowel from the plural and a different ending instead, Gothic and Old Norse gaft, compared to Old English jäve, Old High German gabi, showing the vowel taken from the plural form. East and North Germanic are also well known for having the sharpening of the long glides y and w into stops. Gothic twagge, Old Swedish twegga, compared to Old English tweja and Old High German zwejo. East and North Germanic also kept a productive class 4 weak verb class, like Gothic gawaknan, Old Norse wakna. This class was also found in Old English, like awaknian, but it was much smaller and largely merged with other weak verbs. Another similarity in verbs is how East and North Germanic have a fairly uniform class 3 weak verb class, unlike for example Old English. Strong neuter adjectives are also marked with a T in both North and East Germanic, but this is also found in Old High German. There are also some seemingly unique Eastern Scandinavian and Gothic isoglosses. Old Swedish and Old Gutnish, already from their earliest attestations, have a number of distinctive features within Old Norse, some of which show parallels to East Germanic. Final N in neuter end-stem plurals is preserved, Gothic åsona, ågona, Old Gutnish oiron, Old Swedish öron, ögon, but Old Icelandic öiro, augo. In North Germanic, final nasals were lost, so the Gothic forms with a final vowel would explain the Eastern Scandinavian forms. A similar phenomena is also found in the third person plural subjunctive that later also spread to second person indicative plural in Swedish. Once again with a preserved nasal, Gothic väsina, Old Gutnish, Old Swedish warin, but Old Icelandic wäri, showing that the Eastern form must have had a vowel following it to preserve the nasal. Gothic is well known for completely lacking a umlaut, and this is actually shared with Gutnish. Eastern Old Swedish also has very limited a umlaut and mostly keeps Old u. For example, Gothic budans, Old Gutnish, Old Swedish budin, but Old Icelandic bodin, Old English jeboden, Old High German gibotan. Old Swedish and Old Gutnish also have a low vowel in a few words, similar to Gothic, like Gothic boan, Old Gutnish, Old Swedish boa, where the other Germanic languages usually have u, Old Icelandic boa, Old English boan. Some vocabulary is also quite similar, in particular between Gutnish and Gothic. Both languages use the cognate to English lamb for grown sheep. So what kind of conclusion can we make of this? The Gothic we have preserved in Wulfila's Bible had innovations and was already different from the Proto-Norse we have attested from around the same time, and that we can reconstruct based on the descendant languages. The tribal names, Guts, Goths and Geats, are based on the same Germanic root, but their common history is not fully known. There are some shared traits between East and North Germanic, such as the glide sharpening, second person singular past tense ending, and some traits are also shared in particular with Old Swedish and Gutnish, like a lack of a umlaut and some endings. On the other hand, there are just as many traits shared with West Germanic, and Gothic has some features in common with, for example, Old High German, such as the pronoun forms Gothic is, Old High German er, but Old Norse han, Old English he. In the end, it's hard to draw any clear conclusions based on linguistics. The sheer time depth between Gothic and the later languages also makes any comparison difficult and limited. We need more early material to work with.